Finally, there has been a real breakthrough in the Middle East. The United States of America and Israel are discussing a land blockade of Iran. This is a plan that should increase economic pressure on Tehran after that, after the military campaign against it was suspended. The point is that, in addition to the naval blockade, the US and Israel are seeking to achieve a real siege of Iran, including from Iraq, Turkey, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Turkmenistan, Armenia, and Azerbaijan, which border Iran. And now, the Ukrainian strike in the Caspian Sea on an Iranian vessel could also be the beginning of a blockade of Iran's connections with Russia. And literally on the same day, Trump announced another historic breakthrough. This is an agreement with Hamas militants on the complete disarmament in the Gaza Strip. But there's a catch here. Israel itself has not confirmed support for this agreement and hints that it is unlikely to be implemented. Let's break down both stories in this episode: what kind of blockade against Iran is being prepared, and why the deal in the Gaza Strip could fall apart just as quickly as Donald Trump announced it today. My name is Alex Ipechi. Let's discuss both of these topics, but before we start, I'd ask you to subscribe to this YouTube channel. We are moving towards the milestone of 300,000 subscribers, so I would be grateful for each of your subscriptions. So, I'll start this episode with the topic of the blockade of Iran. According to the British newspaper The Telegraph, US President Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu are considering the possibility of a land blockade of Iran, among other options, aimed at increasing economic pressure on Tehran. This idea was discussed at a meeting in the White House on July 28, where Trump and Netanyahu talked about increasing pressure on Iran by Russian and non-kinetic means. Let me remind you, it was during that period that the US Department of the Treasury stated that it was better to pressure Iran with sanctions and a blockade than strike it militarily. They said Iran already had nothing left to pay its fighters, so everything must be done to make the economic situation for Iran even worse. In addition, it is claimed that Trump believes his current strategy to unblock the Strait of Hormuz has reached a dead end. And in this regard, he is considering various escalation options that could force Tehran to return to the negotiating table. A land blockade would fit well into his maximum pressure strategy aimed at undermining the Iranian economy, which was preceded by a naval blockade. What exactly does this plan for a land blockade entail? Because we have to imagine that a blockade at sea... Okay, that's all clear. The Navy tries to block any ships from entering or leaving Iranian ports. And before that, US Central Command heavily bombed Bandar Abbas to restrict the port's operations and bombed Qeshm Island. Basically, the logic here is clear, but a land blockade is essentially putting an entire country under siege. And Iran is quite large. It borders a fairly large number of countries. So this plan will require the US and Israel to put pressure not directly on Iran, but on Iran's neighbors and its regional partners, so that they close or tighten control at border crossings. And this will restrict trade flows into and out of Iran. But there's a problem here. If we look at the geography, we'll see that Iran borders Iraq, Turkey, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Turkmenistan, Armenia and Azerbaijan, which, if they decide to close their borders, could face retaliatory strikes from Iran. And then the US and Israel would need to provide some guarantees that the blockade of Iran, it won't become too dangerous for these countries. The land blockade could target key border crossings, such as Inchiburun and northern Sirak, which connect Iran and Turkmenistan. The idea being, this would severely disrupt trade links and even ties with China, so it's not a total blockade, but the strongest possible restriction on the flow of goods. At the same time, potential weak links in this whole chain could be Pakistan and Iraq. precisely because they are not close allies of the United States. And here is an important caveat that the Telegraph itself makes. Any country that agrees to cooperate on the issue of a land blockade risks experiencing negative economic consequences due to reduced trade with Iran. That's why it's really expensive for everyone. And since it's expensive, well, most likely it will have to be covered somehow. And the countries that agree to this will demand compensation from Trump. That's why experts don't rule this out at all. There's a possibility that the report about a land blockade is a diversion by the US and Israel to hide their real preparations from Tehran, since the US continues to move military forces into the region. According to a well-informed Israeli official, the participants of the White House meeting on July 28 discussed 3 options for further actions in this war, which escalated again in early July after Iranian attacks on ships in the Hormuz Strait. Among them are reaching an agreement, continuing the naval blockade, and resuming strikes. The context of this decision is clear. Trump had previously stated that the United States could resume military operations against Iran if they did not get everything they wanted from the negotiations. Well, that is, the land blockade is apparently an interim economic pressure tool, which is being considered as an alternative or addition to new airstrikes, while negotiations are ongoing through Oman and other intermediary channels. Now for the second big story of the day, which in my view is far more explosive. Donald Trump announced the following today on his social network Truth Social, quote, "Kizami kondi katz." Today, the Peace Council reached a historic agreement on the complete disarmament of Hamas and all other armed groups in the Gaza Strip. This is a monumental step toward lasting peace and security. Trump clarified that after the disarmament of Hamas and other groups, Israeli troops will be completely withdrawn from the Gaza Strip. And the International Stabilization Forces, together with the new Palestinian police, will take the place of the security forces. The Gaza Strip will be governed by a technocratic national committee, which is a body not directly connected to either Hamas or the current leadership of the Palestinian National Authority. And now Trump has thanked Egypt, Qatar, and Turkey for their mediation. Such an agreement was reportedly signed on July 30th in El Alamein, Egypt, and this is the first time in the entire history of this terrorist movement when Hamas has ever agreed to any kind of arms limitations. The negotiations went on for months, and in the final stage, it was Egypt, Qatar, and Turkey that exerted steady pressure on Hamas to accept conditions that it had previously categorically rejected. And now, according to the plan, pay attention, according to the plan, all heavy and light weapons of Hamas and other armed groups must be rendered inoperable within 6 to 8 months. Remember this point, all heavy and light weapons, but of course there's a catch. Just a few hours after Donald Trump's statement, it became clear that Israel did not support this deal. A Reuters source in the Israeli leadership said the following even before Donald Trump's statement: Israel demands the complete disarmament of Hamas, including the removal of weapons from Gaza and the total demilitarization of the sector, as preliminary conditions for any process. He emphasized that the 15-point document in question does not provide a satisfactory answer to these demands, and therefore Israel expressed its objections. Once again, Israel demands the complete removal of all these weapons from the Gaza Strip, and the deal that Trump supposedly announced, it provides for the destruction and deactivation of these weapons, but they will remain in the Gaza Strip. According to Axios, Netanyahu met with Special Envoy Stephen Witkoff in the Oval Office on Tuesday and told him that Israel supports the continuation of negotiations, but this wording is far from an approval of specific terms. that are currently on the table, and according to the Jerusalem Post, Israel had already conveyed its objections to former British Prime Minister Tony Blair, who is now acting as a mediator. And a separate source added, quite firmly, very firmly, there will be no exceptions for specific weapons or certain individuals. One authority, one law, one weapon, period. There are also counter-conditions. On the other hand, a representative of the Hamas negotiation delegation, Razi Kamad, told Al Jazeera that the movement will not begin to disarm until Israeli forces completely leave the Gaza Strip. After that, people within Hamas also clarified a key detail. Attention! I didn't say this for nothing. Remember the point about heavy weapons. So, Hamas now claims heavy weapons will be under the control of the Palestinian administration being established in Gaza, and it cannot be handed over to Israel or any other non-Palestinian country. So, it seems like Hamas kind of agreed to destroy the heavy weapons, if you believe Trump's statement, but at the same time, it seems like they didn't agree, if you believe Hamas's own statement. So, it seems like they agreed on something, but again, they didn't really agree on anything, and I'm sorry, but this is a classic deadlock. It's like asking which came first, the chicken or the egg? The egg or the chicken? What do I mean by that? Israel demands the disarmament of Hamas as a precondition for withdrawing Israeli troops. And Hamas refuses to disarm until Israeli troops are fully withdrawn. And so, representatives of the US and the Minsk Council told journalists that the disarmament process will begin as early as next month. But the very fact that Hamas often publicly denies agreements after they have already been announced makes this whole arrangement extremely fragile. It's also unclear what will happen to the militants' light and personal weapons. This issue isn't addressed in the agreement at all, and any militant can say, listen, I have 7 AK rifles here. This is my personal weapon. You didn't specify what to do with it. These aren't Hamas's weapons. These are my personal rifles. What to do with them isn't specified at all. The conclusion of the entire episode is as follows. First, 1. The land blockade of Iran and the deal on the Gaza Strip are Washington's attempts to achieve results through diplomatic and economic means where military pressure has either been suspended or has become too risky and expensive. 2. In both cases, the actual implementation of the plan depends on third parties who have not publicly confirmed their participation. 3. Iran's neighbors in the case of the blockade and Israel in the case of the Gaza Strip. That is, Trump announces again, we have reached an agreement with Hamas, but Israel knows about it but does not confirm it. And then the US wants a land blockade of Iran, but for that they need to reach an agreement with a number of countries. Whether they have reached an agreement or not is still unknown, and in both cases there is a risk that the plan will remain only on paper. 5. The third idea, the blockade of Iran, could be a diversion, and in reality, something completely different might be in preparation. For the Middle East as a whole, this means the continuation of a period of uncertainty. At the same time, both the economic strangulation of Iran and the disarmament of Hamas are on the table. But neither of these processes has a clear enforcement mechanism if one of the sides refuses to fulfill its part of the deal. Well, let's say Hamas says, I don't want to, I've changed my mind, then what? Or Israel says, okay, you've disarmed Hamas, but we won't withdraw our troops from the Gaza Strip. And what do you do then? These points aren't specified at all. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, I would be grateful. You can do so with any donation using the links and details in the description of this video. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.